Hey, welcome to the inaugural. Is that the right word for this speaking? Inaugural?
It is inaugural, yeah.
Original? Yeah, of the Tripping Point podcast. And the point of this podcast is for us to talk about there's so much content out there about how successful people are and how they got there. And here's my recipe and my playbook, and you should follow this and you follow that. And I don't hear a lot of talking about, man, did I really screw up? I fell on my flat on my face. Man, I'm embarrassed about this thing that I did, right? And I think we learn more from those types of
Mm.
experiences and we do the really successful stuff that we kind of go, oh yeah, of course I planned on doing that and I did it. So that's the point to this podcast. I'm Josh France. I've got, I'm on my fourth company. I've had three exits and this one's the most interesting for sure, I think. And my first guest is my longtime buddy, Brian Keith, who we've known each other for an embarrassing amount of years 46,
Let's just call it 40.
40 plus.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and we can talk about how we met and sort of how we've stayed connected for almost a half a century. Oh boy, that's a scary number. But yeah, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and your superpowers of
Yeah,
what you do.
sounds good. Thanks, Josh, and thanks for the opportunity. Really excited to be a part of the conversation today and just share a few of my mistakes along the way. But yeah, kind of been in the technology industry for the large part of my career and studied computer science in Azusa back in the late '90s when we had like dial-up internet and all that good stuff. But have been in the tech industry in Southern California, a variety of different companies, some big, some small, all the way from 30-person startup to a very large company. I'm working today at a company that's 80,000 employees across the board. So companies all the different sizes, and yeah, I've been a part of different stages and phases in the technology journey, but usually with a focus on optimization, organization, and increase in efficiency, usually from the tooling side. So my focus today is really on what we would call developer tools. So as folks are writing software and creating and deploying software, my team's responsible for ensuring that our developers have all the tools that they need to do their work, and really just to create clarity within the development teams and ensure that when a product manager comes up with a great idea, that the developer has clarity on what that idea is and how to get that change into production, and then also just managing the source code along the way.
There cannot be any shortage of material on this call when you're talking about disasters in implementing software. I mean, there's no. I mean, my own experience is that there it's more often unsuccessful than it's successful. And I haven't worked for big companies like you do, but I I mean, and I guess that's part of your job. So your job is to make sure that the tool delivers whatever
Mm.
the business need is, right?
Right.
But I mean, so does anything come to mind right off the bat of, yeah, they thought they were looking for this and we put this in and it was a spectacular disaster, or just the actual product itself was terrible, or it didn't fit the business need at all? Any examples you can think of?
Yeah, a couple that come to mind as you're kind of teeing that up is, I've run across from time to time in different arenas and different scenarios where, an individual who is a stakeholder in a decision making process will have a favorite tool. And maybe it's something that they've used at a prior job somewhere else at a different organization, or every once in a while they have, I don't know, a friend that works at a given company and they have a preference for it because of that. And I think that, that it's a little bit sometimes off track to begin with, a tool in mind, right? What tends to be a little more successful is to begin with the end in mind and the requirements. Like, what do you need a given tool to do? What features do you need it to be able to supply to the user of the tool? Some of those tendencies are to look at things you've used before and assume that because it worked in this environment, it's going to work just as well in a secondary environment. That's not always the case. And so, as we're thinking about mistakes that we've made, right, in our career and other different spaces and places, that's one thing I've seen is the tendency to pick the tool first without being disciplined about what are the requirements that you want the tool to provide and deliver. And that's honestly, it's a little bit harder to maybe sit down and to ask yourself and ask your teams and your stakeholders, to have those interviews with them and to really just get clarity around what does the tool need to do? What jobs do you need the tool to function under? And then matching that and scoring that against the different options that are available to users as you're deploying that and getting it out into the business.
Okay, well that's teed up really well for what we want to talk about here, right? Which is, and maybe without saying any names, I don't know, maybe if it's a high profile, like if you work for Elon or something, I'd really like to know. But so somebody that a leader that came in, yeah. So think about a high top leader. I think you've told me before too, like there's been some leaders in some of these organizations who are way up, and they should never be the ones making these decisions to begin with, but they had some sort of reason. They loved the tool at their previous work, like you said, or they learned about it on their own, and so they think it's the best thing in the world, or their brother-in-law works there. Like, have you had a real, like somebody way up in the organization try to push something, like go around the process and try to push a tool or a process that was clearly not right, or at least you had no evidence that it would work?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I've run across scenarios when it's been a complete, abject failure to match, but I would definitely say that there have been different places and spaces where I've seen the thumb on the scale in some areas where there's a preference for a given tool or a given vendor, depending on relationships that may be in place. And that's why I think it's really important to just try to approach these things objectively, right? And for these teams that are coming in and they're trying to figure out what is the right set of tools for the business, it's not just the tool. It's really that having a given tool or a given software solution in place is going to open up certain opportunities for you as a business. It's going to create certain pathways of success, but then also it's going to limit other potential pathways for you because you've selected tool A versus tool B. And so, generally speaking, none of these things are permanent. You can always make changes later on down the road, especially in the domain that we're in. It is possible to move your data around as needed, but there are some costs associated with that. There's an expense
Right.
associated with moving data, moving teams, moving people, retraining people, and then trying to get the value you need out of the tool itself. I think one of the other failures I see a lot is not really calculating the ROI of operation post implementation. I've seen a lot of teams get excited about standing something up and getting it set up, but then they've underestimated what it requires to keep the thing running, to keep the care and feeding, keep the lights on. That could be as simple as just providing access to a tool to something more complex like customization or configuration after implementation. And so, definitely when I'm involved in these kind of assessments and analyses, one of the things I'm looking at is, what's it going to require to operate the given solution post implementation in such a way that we're going to get the value out of it that the business expects us to get out of it.
So you have to not only find the right tool, but you also have to have some metrics in mind that that tool is going to affect one way or another, and then actually you have a you have to implement new other tools to measure the metrics that you're going to essentially grade the return on. Is that something else, or is there one spot that maybe you can, like a dashboard where you go, hey, this tool's doing this and this tool's doing this and this tool's doing this, like a health check, not a business metrics?
Yeah, there's a
Right.
couple different ways that we approach that. One is exactly what you said, where you have an external, monitoring device that will be able to collect data from a variety of different capabilities and synthesize those into a unified dashboard. So that's one way. Another way that we've done it in the past is some tools actually have embedded KPIs and metrics, and they'll tell you about things like engagement. For example, how many people are logging in on a daily, monthly basis, how many people are creating content or interacting with tools. This generally tells you if the tool's providing its function. People, unless they have to, are required to do it for some compliance reason. They're going to use the tools that help them to do the jobs that they want them to do. And then the third way that we do it, which may be a little unconventional and not super scalable, is we run surveys. We'll send a survey out to our users and just ask them like, hey, in this particular tool or in this particular domain, how are you finding the tool sets that you have available to you? Are they sufficient? Are they insufficient? Are they reliable? Are they available when you want them to be? How's the performance? When you click on a button, how long does it take for the window to pop up on the screen? Those types of things, right? Those are the things that we're looking for our users, because it's one thing to deploy something, but again, if it's not usable or useful, people are going to gravitate towards finding other ways to get their work done.
Okay, so that this is the tripping point, right? So can you think of a time when there was a like, oh, we're going to measure it with this, and it's got to be this number, and that number was just so ridiculously off, or whatever that measure is, was so ridiculously off what the organization or you or the whoever was trying to put it in place was looking for, or the feedback was spectacularly bad. And you think of an implementation where you're like, we have got to pull the plug on this thing, or make some changes to it right now, or get the company in here to tell us what in the world is going on, like just some sort of wreckage.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind when you're mentioning that is, I would say, less around a failure of the tool itself. It was more around a failure to calculate in the effort required to get people to move from where they were to where we wanted them to be. And it's one thing to move data from a source tool to another source tool, but it's a whole other thing to go on a campaign in a large business and to tell people that you're going to move or you're going to change their world, right? A lot of people, again, they become comfortable with the way that they work and the way they operate. Much of us are either Apple users or Android users, or we've
Sure.
gotten
Yeah.
used to where the buttons are and what the settings are, and kind of get a little bit of second nature in our fingers and our rhythms. It's the same thing with the software tools that we're helping to deploy and support for the business. And so, the first time I was involved in a major migration in the tooling landscape, we didn't really calculate the amount of effort that was going to be required to win hearts and minds. To be quite honest, it was assumed at that point that we would just tell people, hey, by the way, this is what we're doing. And then there wouldn't be any resistance. They would just go along with it because the executive team had made that decision. But come to find out, when we did our very first presentation on where we were going and what we were doing, there was a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, many of them valid, some of them petty, but all needed to be addressed along the
How
way.
many people are we talking about? How many users?
In that particular migration, that was around like 800 people, but we were moving from one
Wow.
tool to another. Yeah.
And is this what kind of tool are we talking about? Are we talking about sales or coding, or what exactly was
Yeah.
it?
Engineering space, so software development space. So the people I was working with at that point would have been a combination of developers, business analysts, and database administrators, a lot of technical people, highly technical.
And then there are a lot of tools used for that. What were they coming from? What were you going to flip the lights off of after this implementation?
Yeah,
Can
I
you say
kept that generic for specific reasons. It was a
homegrown?
common. There were some homegrown tools. Yeah,
Okay.
there were some, and then there were some other tools that were available in the industry that maybe were losing a little bit of market share. And so we were in the process of moving teams to a unified tool that was emerging as a market leader at the time. And I don't think the tooling decision, I don't think was wrong. I still believe that was the right decision for the business because it was more designed to help unify the organization, and ensure that teams had access to everything they needed to in a centralized location. What we could have done better is probably could have done a better job at maybe gathering feedback from all the teams before we had made the final decision and said, hey, this is where we're going to move the org, and then just doing a better job at maybe providing an FAQ. Here are the questions that we got asked along the way, and here's answers to the FAQ. So that as people had questions, we could tell them, hey, we're collecting their questions, we're answering them, we're going to put them in a published repository for everyone to look at and be able to catch up on the latest status.
So that's what you learned,
Yes.
right? That's like, if I had to do this again,
Yes.
I'd get a whole lot more feedback and maybe like screenshots. And I don't know how that looks exactly for what you do, but, or demos
Mhm.
or, okay. So what, that's what you would have done. What was the actual strategy there? Was it just, hey, we're going to tell them what to use this day at this meeting, and then we're going to find out what they think? Was that the strategy that failed?
I would say, depending on who you ask, there either was a insufficient strategy, or it was more just the strategy was execution. Just go do it. I don't know that the team spent enough time building out a detailed strategy around that particular migration. We were in the tech industry, as most people know, we move pretty quick. And so a lot of times, you can come up with an idea in the morning, and then by the afternoon you're implementing that idea. And then that's pretty typical of the industry, to move with ideas pretty quickly. And
Wow.
so in this particular case, I'd had conversations with leadership about the problems we were trying to solve. And I think there was just at that point some faith in my ability to get things done quickly, because that was kind of how I operate at least at that point in my career. I was a little more like action first. And so I was leading with action during that migration because I thought that we had a clear target we were shooting at. And it might have been clear in my mind. Where it was not clear is in the mind of all the 800 stakeholders I was working with. And I needed to give them time to catch up. Also needed to provide them just better documentation, better communication about, again, what we were changing and why, what the benefits were that we were seeking to achieve out of the transition.
So how do you know when well, I don't know, maybe you've gone all the way to, hey, over prepare for this stuff, or is there still times when you can cowboy it like you did then, right? Which is,
Yeah.
that's how I would describe it. It's just like, hey, let's get on the horse and get riding and see what happens along the way, and we'll shoot it out if we need to, or camp overnight over there. But we got to get this done. We got to get from A to B as quick as possible. Is that a is that strategy the a valid right strategy still sometimes today? I mean, because don't you can't compare it to 8 people. Like, you're talking about 800 people, right?
Right.
Like, I can see changing something overnight or in a day for a team of 8 people, but 800 is
Yeah.
a whole nother story. So is there still room to cowboy when you at times?
I mean, it is a strategy. I don't know that I would say it's a good strategy, right? It's a way to get things done. But I would say since then, what I've been trying to lean more into is giving people time to calibrate to change and to process change. I've found that, again, this is, what would you do different? What did you do wrong type stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm finding that human beings need a little more time to process the change that's in front of them, or they do better with a little more time to process. And so what I've been doing more recently is I've been trying to bake in time into our project plan for adequate time for communication, digestion of the information, and then some feedback and response on the back end so that we can then make adjustments if we need to. And adjustments could be, we potentially adjust our rollout plan so that the rollout is a little bit longer with more time. It might be that we go in groups. So maybe, we work with a group that's a little more interested at the beginning. They're a little bit more open to
Yeah.
embracing change, and we work with groups that need more time to process later. But I do think, yeah, cowboy, yeah, moving fast and just, yeah, making, shifting things. That's a strategy, and I think for the right environment and the right project, that might make sense. Case in point, if you have a security vulnerability,
Mm.
that is something you probably need to move quickly on. It'd be a good idea to address that as quickly as possible because you've got some type of an exposure that needs to be addressed sooner than later. So I think it depends on what the project is or what the transition is to decide which strategy is best.
So back to your story, you
Yeah.
had 800 people. We need to make
Well,
a change. The strategy was, we'll tell them about it when it comes time.
as we go, yeah,
As
along
we
the way,
Okay.
yeah.
By the way, how do you factor in some transition time? Like, I mean, hey, company, we're going to lose X percentage we're going to lose some productivity because they're used to Android and we're Apple. We're moving to Apple. So all the Android guys are gonna, have a real problem with this. Is that like part of the planning with like, hey, if you have a big project that we're working on right now, it's going to take longer to get that out than it normally would because we're switching from this to that. Is that part of the discussion?
It is part of the discussion, but I will say one of the things I found with the technical folks I've worked with in the teams I've worked in is they tend to be able to adapt and embrace pretty quickly.
Yeah, okay. The
Especially,
technology.
yeah, exactly, tech guys, yeah, and the resistance is more like a preference than it is a lack of capability.
Yeah,
In
okay.
the tech space, people seem to be able to figure out how to push things forward, because
Interesting.
they're genius. They're they're very sharp people, so they
Yes.
find a path forward once they've decided that they're going to take that path.
So it's not a systemic can't do it. It's I don't want to do it.
Generally, that's what I've discovered. There would be some can'ts here and there, and again, that gets back to the conversation we were having at the top about selecting the right tool and making sure that the tool
Yeah.
meets your requirements. Ideally, you've crossed off all the essential requirements with your selection process, so that by the time you get to implementation, the can'ts hopefully you got a plan for each one of those.
So what do you think that particular instance, what do you think it costs a company in downtime? I
Yeah, and
mean,
so that was actually part of our project requirement was to ensure there was no downtime, and so we did a decent amount of phasing with the projects. Oh, sorry, the teams,
okay.
so that we would take kind of teams over. We take team A, team B, team C, and do them one at a time. And the benefit of doing that, obviously, is that you're not taking the entire division down in one shot. And because of the way the tools were established in the business, they were designed in such a way where they could coexist, meaning
Okay.
that it was possible to run them in parallel. And in many cases, that was beneficial to the teams because they could look at their data in Tool B and kind of compare it to Tool A and decide, hey, is everything here that I need? Do I feel comfortable knowing where I'm coming from and what I'm going to? So that was one of the pieces of our strategy was just to build those in as safeguards in one point, really to help people feel comfortable, but also just to ensure that we have data, there's no data loss, data integrity issues along the way as well.
Yeah. They have an alternative.
That's right.
Like,
And if they did find an issue, like the data in the new tool wasn't where it was supposed to be, didn't look right, something was missing, we always had that backup version we could revert to. And so as we would roll forward with the team, so team B is an example, our second team, they would, they would take a look at it and let us know if there are any issues. And if there were issues that were irresolvable, they had an option to roll back if they needed to while we addressed changes and issues that were found under their particular migration.
probably not received well, even if you could roll it back. Like, yeah, I just did all this
Right.
work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, no, it didn't work. So
Yeah.
can you go roll back to Tuesday and start over?
Right.
That,
Less than ideal for sure. Definitely our preferred path was what you'd call like a fail forward. I don't know if you heard that before, but it means that there's a failure, but you're failing into a mode where you're looking for solutions that will keep you moving in the direction you had initially planned to move.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if that story ended this way or not,
Okay.
but have you ever had a big implementation? Everyone's all in, you think you've got the right tool, you get into it. It turns out to be an unmitigated disaster and you just pull the plug and rip it all out and go back to what you were doing. We've got to start over.
Yeah, I can think of one that was like that for sure.
Not the one you were talking about.
Different one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we don't need to get into too much detail on it, I suppose, but what was the reason for that one
I
failing
think,
so
yeah, in
spectacular?
that particular case, the company that we were working with in that area was very early in their journey as a company. They were a startup and they were still kind of building the plane while it was flying, as it were. And so when we got into the process of working with them, unfortunately, I don't think that the product was about where we had actually thought it was going to be. And then by the time that we actually got our data into the product, that's when we realized that there were some gaps with the product based on what it was advertised to be versus what we experienced.
And you couldn't, okay, so you couldn't test it?
That was part of the testing process, but yeah, it's something actually important to note is typically when you're doing a demo on a piece of software with a sales agent, all their test data is curated, polished, pruned. It's highly organized for a very specific set of use cases and scenarios.
I
So
see.
when you get your live production or even your own test data into a system, you have the potential for seeing different results. Yeah.
Cool. I
Yeah.
like it, man. I think some leadership would learn a whole lot from. I mean, because that's where it starts, right? Is there some sort of business need that someone wants to solve,
Yep.
and they want to do it with technology? They start talking
Yeah.
about platforms to do it, and if they don't have a guy like you that's been through the war and knows, hey, these are the pitfalls you might run into.
I think the most important thing in all those is just to have an open mindset and to anticipate that there will be surprises, and that's okay. But to have a plan of like how you're going to deal with surprises as they come up. And I think that's where the leadership component comes in, not only the person who's leading the project or leading a change in and of itself, but
Mm.
also their executive team as well, so that you know that when you hit some rough waters, that you've got a plan for how you're going to deal with those rough waters when they show up. And does your executive team have your back, and does your leadership team have your back in moving forward?
I broke my own rule with my phone here.
All
It's
good.
supposed to tell us to turn off our phones, but I didn't even do it myself.
Yeah. So for me, it's about mindset. It's again, and the people who are leading those changes, they have to have that open mindset and accept the fact that there are going to be surprises. There's going to be some bumps along the way, and it's okay to take a pause and regroup, reevaluate, and reassess. Those are okay things to do. But communication, I think, along the way is the absolute most critical piece, and that's communication to the people who are going to be impacted, communication with the team who's executing some of these changes, and also with leadership team above you, so that they know what you're doing and how they can help support you along the way.
But it's okay. So is it communication before, which you mentioned, like
Yeah.
feedback, right? I mean, it might be the answer might be yes. Okay, I feel it coming already, but is it before? Is it during? Like, hey, this is we talked about this thing. Now is the time. These things are happening. Remember, and then
After
communication is it? It's all
all
of
of
it.
them. That's right.
So in the disaster you described, the pre was not there. Sounds
Correct.
like the
In the
wasn't.
first scenario we talked about, the first story, it was in the
Yeah.
pre. There was a gap there. In the second scenario, it was in the during. And but to the point you made, after is just as important. I think it's just as important to close the loop and let everyone know, hey, we've arrived at where we wanted to arrive. This was a success, whether it be eventual or otherwise, right? It was a success. We've achieved the goals we wanted to achieve. And spending some time to just thank the people who supported you along the way. And that could be a team who was in the trenches solving problems and, slinging data from left to right, or it could just be individual unique, yeah, stakeholders or advocates along the way, people who supported the cause and championed for you.
It's interesting because I never heard. Well, I'll have you put a percentage on it. We'll end with this.
Okay.
I don't think I ever heard. So we went back to our contract and ripped it up and said this isn't going to work and went to something different. You made them all at some level. You made it work. Whether it worked great or not on the back end is something that we could is a whole nother discussion, right? But I don't think I ever heard, or you tell me if you ever had one where you said, okay, we're going to go with ABC company and we signed the contract and here's the plan and we're implement and now no, we're cancel. We're going with XYZ because that didn't work for all sorts of reasons. Has that ever happened?
Yeah, there was one where that happened, but in that particular project, we did our best for about a year, to be honest, to try to work through the
Oh,
agreement and
okay.
decision,
Gave
the
him the
initial
chance.
decision. Yeah, good amount of time, good amount of effort from my side and the company I was working with. And the vendor, the company, they made a lot of effort too. So it wasn't for lack of effort on either side. But yeah, after about a year of banging your head against the same kind of problem, you do end up at a place where you're going like, hey, this I
But
feel like it's time to maybe go back and reevaluate.
that's one out of how many?
Oh, I don't know.
How many
Less than
years have you?
100, more than 50. So somewhere between 50 and 100 of these little kind of mini migrations and tool selections and tool analyses.
You've done more than 50 to 100.
Depends on your size and scale, but yeah, these other migrations.
I mean, you've been doing this kind of thing since I worked with you
Yeah.
in 1995,
You mean 2000?
6,
Yeah.
7,
Yeah.
8,
That's right.
98, maybe right in there.
98. Yeah.
I mean, you were implementing tools then, so if it's only happened once, maybe this is for software company owners and leaders to take heart, because the guys that you are dealing with to get your software in want it to happen. They're as invested,
Yeah.
sounds like. They're maybe not as invested, but they certainly want it to work well for your own reputation too, right? Like you said, hey, somebody said you're the action guy, go take care of it.
Yeah.
And so you were just as invested. You are not just as, you're very invested at seeing these things happen successfully for all sorts of reasons. First of all, it's a whole lot of a pain, less of a pain in the tailpipe for you.
Yeah. For me, the investment is that when we're making a purchase of a specific tool or given product, I want it to give the value to the business it was intended to give. I want it to function as designed. But the second piece of that for me is that I grew up in my career in a model where you operated what you built, and so that was always kind of the mantra of the organization that I was in. Is if you didn't want to get a phone call at 2 a.m. because the software system went down, you built your software system in a way that was resilient. And if you did a good job in building a resilient system, you didn't get the call and you got to get a good night's sleep. So that was always the incentive for me, right?
A
Is to
good
build something that
motivation.
was resilient, that was self-healing, that would operate and function reliably, which benefits the business, but also if you're the operator, it benefits you as well.
Right. All
Yeah.
right. Well, we'll end it on that, and with the nugget of incentivize your projects correctly,
Absolutely.
and that sometimes what is the carrot's the good thing, right? Sometimes vinegar is just as effective as a carrot. Is that, am I
I haven't
mixing
heard
metaphors?
that one. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, BK, thanks for being my friend for 40 something years.
Of course.
And it has been awesome watching you. I mean, in your career and just getting better and better at what you do. And